Good morning and thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, so the slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go ahead and uh, my session mainly will focus on basics of machine learning in the first session. In the afternoon first session, I will do subspace methods for machine learning. Uh, I will do images, but down the line, I think more focus is given on video. But even their video, barring a certain interframe information, it is still processing still images at a time. So the background we build here is quite useful down the line. Okay. Let us not, given the fact that this is online and a large number of participants, we will take questions in the end. Let us not
Yes, sir.
break the momentum. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So we look at why and how of machine learning, but I will drive the whole program towards subspace methods. And I also very clearly tell you that majority of you who are trying to get into this area, you have to learn the subspaces very well because the linear algebra part is very important. But don't persist with subspace methods because it is my liking. It is not in your interest. You should move more towards neural architectures, which are more applicable. I like this because I come from this background, and there are some beautiful things that we can do with this. But most of the things will be done in a neural architecture. So focus more on that. So this is briefly the presentation outline that I am planning. Uh, what is machine learning? Why do you want to do machine learning? Learning schemes and focus on subspace methods and example for image processing applications. Okay. So what's really machine learning? And also you don't need to note down anything. The entire presentation is will be shared with you by today evening. So you can only note down some comments and other things which you feel like. Okay. So what is really machine learning? You may have already had few versions of machine learning. Machine learning doesn't have one fixed avatar. So one of the avatars depends on from which background you have come. So it is mainly ability to form rules automatically and subsequent use, basically to take decision. How? By exposing a system. The system may mean just an algorithm, a structure, a set of data constructs, sensors, etc. to input data. So basically machine learning means you expose a system to data or information, and based on that it will form rules automatically, and the rules that you it forms automatically you can use it further for getting your next input data better analyzed. And if it is not better analyzed, no problem. If it makes mistake, it's very good. It means it's learning well. It will use the mistake and update its rules so that the next time you do, you get very good answers. And today, 99.9% accuracy of answers is very common. Okay. Yeah. But why do you want to do machine learning now? If you notice, society and information related tasks are getting increasingly complex. Data is of exponential order. For example, each of you on your smartphone, you have data, approximately the amount of data we had when we were using a mainframe computer 30 years back. So 30 years back, what we were using on a mainframe computer, the amount of data for the whole institution, that much amount of data, many of you have it accessible or stored in a cloud with your smartphone. So almost every person today is a computer center by himself or herself. They're actually carrying a computer center on their pocket. Okay. Today, applications dominate by genetic data, genome information, pharmaceutical industry, and the latest application is a US election. Okay, that also a lot of people are doing machine learning on the US election. Okay, the main idea is structure. See, pattern and rules if can be extracted, would be very valuable and useful in finding appropriate response. It has nothing to do with data. The raw data that we process and we are processing all these days as computer science is already behind us. We do deal with data because these data are generated by huge amount of sensors. For example, your mobile phone, even entry level mobile phone today has about 10 to 15 different sensors. And a good mobile phone would have about 40 sensors. Okay. In another 5 years, all of your mobile phones will be automatic pathology and preliminary diagnostics. Even if you don't like it, your mobile phone will be recording your ECG and telling you you're all right, don't worry, stuff like that. Okay. So that's a kind of thing, and all these are related to structures of the data, patterns in the data, rules by which these data are processed, all that can be extracted. Today, biometric, data mining, text to speech, medical image processing, your social media, elections. I won't be surprised even if the Bihar elections are also being processed by somebody. So, this is the kind of machine learning task which does data processing, not in the data crunching style, but data processing in the range of structures, patterns, and rules. So what you are basically doing is, after 30 years, computer science has shifted from data processing to pattern processing. We are now going to process large number of patterns of data, whether the data is images, text, speech, whatever, but patterns in data. Okay. Now, why is ML suddenly? I know my colleague Professor Shastri in IAC was one of the pioneers of machine learning in the world. He was doing machine learning 30 years back, and most people were laughing because he was doing machine learning 30 years back. Today, everybody does machine learning because these things have happened. Lot of pattern recognition is available. Image processing is now part of every device. A lot of interesting statistics and advanced ideas of hypothesis testing, which were not used by statisticians, but now being used by us. Lot of interesting algorithms for clustering of data, interesting learning theories and methods, boosting strategies, new classifier models, both neural and non-neural, many tricks like kernel methods, all this. So approximately about 30, 40 different topics, fields, structures, attitudes, learnings, all of them have come together now. Okay. Basically, learning, broadly speaking, is of two types. All other learning is between this, combination of this, so on and so forth. So the first type of learning is what is called supervised learning, where the following happens. You are given data. Obviously, you can see data in the form of patterns. The patterns could include shapes, colors, size, everything. Okay. So you are given data which tells you that data like this, patterns in the data like this, you call it correct or yes or 1. Patterns in the data like this, you call it 0 or no or not. Given that you train a system, we'll see what the system is. You train a system in a certain way that it will recognize future data correctly belonging to either this or this, because you have used this data, what is called label data, to train. So let's look at typically this: color, shape, size. What are the outputs? If the color is blue, the shape is torus, and the size is big, you say the output is yes, correct. Here, if the color is red, shape is arrow, size is small, you call it no or 0. So it's basically learn to approximate a function of 3 variables. In this case, we call these variables as features finally, and map it to a truth function. The truth function is yes or no, 0 or 1, whatever you want. How do you learn to approximate this function? From a set of training data. The training data contains the three features and it is mapped to a truth function. You train. It is exactly like children going to class for test. You teach them in the class and you give them tests and you mark them correct or wrong and they come back and take feedback from you, learn all that and then they face an exam. Very simple. What we do is supervised learning. Okay. So what is the success of supervised learning? The success of supervised learning is the ability to have very good labeled data. This is the main issue in medical image processing. That's why all scan and other pathology reports, other things, goes to a radiologist or oncologist who will look at the data and mark it. Mark it as okay, it is diabetes, it is cancer stage 1, cancer stage 3, leukemia, whatever it is, right? Labeled data. The other thing to learn very clearly, in fact, is this. Machine learning is a function approximation. What is the correct way to learn machine learning? Machine learning is a function approximation from the input space to the output space. Today, the input space is not necessarily data, but more of feature. So, feature space. Output is not just 1 or 0, it is called action space, where you say, okay, it is a cancer, go for treatment. It is a mild form of cancer, go for chemotherapy, whatever it is. Okay, so this output is called action space, input is called feature space. So, machine learning is to find a function from the input, which is not just the data, but the cousin of the data, the feature space, to the output, which is action space. Because there are hundreds of such functions that can be found, you want to find the best among all the functions. Therefore, to find the best among all feasible functions is an act of optimization. So, machine learning means function approximation and optimization. All other versions of machine learning is a diluted version of this global definition. Function approximation and optimization. Function approximation from the feature space to the action space. Because the functions are numerous, you want the best under the constraints, that is optimization. So if you cannot do optimization, you are doing blind machine learning, which approximately 99.99% of all people doing machine learning are doing. Blindly doing. Just connect it, give it to a deep net, give it to some CNN, give it to some CPU processor, you will get an output. Take the output, collect your salary, or publish a paper. Nobody is actually doing the optimization part because it does something internally, some kind of optimization. You don't know what it is, but you are happy with the answer. Very few actually do the optimization part. I want you to learn because it's important if you want to do a new problem. Okay? So how does the supervised learning look at? It builds on a large amount of training data. Training data where the output is clearly labeled. The learner is what a machine learner really is. Okay, it learns internally all the relationship between each features and the output, and it builds an internal hypothesis for this. Okay, if it is like this, if x1 is b, then x3 is yes, and this is yes, I call it yes. So it learns, tutored. But the internal model of the learning is captured by some hypothesis. Okay. How do you know you have learned well? How do you know the learning is correct? I think some participants have to mute their audio. Okay. How does the learning get endorsed? what one calls verified. First thing you test. Test what you have learned, like your class test. What do you do? While testing, you give data similar to the training data, not identical. Similar. Hopefully, they belong to the same class. B, A, yes. What is the truth function? Okay. It predicts the truth function like this. Okay. For the first one, it is true. The second one, Y, and first one, Y, second one, no. The truth value. This is yes, this is no. And you can verify because the testing data also has truth functions which you know, but you have not supplied it to the machine. It's like giving a test question in the class test for which the teacher knows the answer, but the teacher is trying to find out whether the students can do the answer correctly. Okay. Now, if the answer to this testing data is very good, it means it has learned very well. One, it also means all the data here come from a class which is also this, which means training has been done very well. All the classes of output which could have come has been covered. Okay. Many things can happen. Testing data, how do you get? What is a portion of the testing data compared to training data? After testing, there is a scope for verification. Normally, a third-party verification is done. If your performance is on very good on third-party verification, it means your learning model is very good. You have trained the learning model very well, so on and so forth. Okay. What is the problem with this? The problem with supervised learning is this. Suppose I give a blue arrow. We have trained the network or the learning system to give no for a red arrow, whereas we have trained the network or the machine learning system to say yes to blue torus, blue star, blue square, blue rectangle. Lot of different shapes trained for blue and only red arrow trained as no. What will be the answer to this? Will it say yes or will it say no? If it says yes, it is based on color. If it says no, it is based on shape. How does it do? Or I give a yellow torus. Blue torus, yes. Yellow torus, yes. Yellow, no. Suppose I give yellow torus. Blue torus, it has been trained to say yes. For yellow ellipsis, it has been trained yes. It gets a yellow torus. Whereas red torus is no, blue torus is yes. Yellow filled things are yes. These odd shapes are no. What will it do? Therefore, the problem with supervised learning is generalization is very difficult. Makki ka makki, everything has to be trained. For this, I also don't know what it will give. For this, I also don't know what it will give. Okay. Find out. Okay. So, the problem with supervised learning is unless all the features and their class association is completely known, you cannot. So, some odd data, inconvenient data, imprecise data, it will not be able to handle. And what are the different hypothesis space? Today, decision tree, neural network, k-nearest neighbor, Bayes classifier, support vector machine, boosting techniques, etc., etc., etc. So today, approximately 20 or 25 different learning models for hypotheses are there. More and more are coming. That's why it's very important for people who do machine learning to learn some 1 second level of statistics. Very important. Because we want to know how we are interpreting the data. It is not just the answer. The interpretation is the critical thing here. How does a hypothesis work? A simple hypothesis, for example, here says all blue is yes, all yellow is no. I want in the data of blue and yellow a line which separates the two. This is a classifier, basically. What you are doing in neural network and other thing is building a classifier which has this ability to separate data into two classes. If you can separate data into two classes, you can separate data into 10 classes. You take 2, from 2 you make it 4, etc., etc. You can separate it into 10 classes. So basically, the problem of classifier is I have data x1, I have data x2. The data could be x1, x2, or the data could be the feature of x1, feature of x2. So you may be doing classification in the data space or in the feature space. Okay. So given x1 and x2, I want to find a line which separates x1 and x2 in some m dimension space. Don't worry about that. Okay. What you do naturally? What do you do as teachers? You go to the class normally. Of course, it may be changing now, but in the classroom, all the set of benches on the left, all the girls will be sitting, all the benches on the right, the boys will. Natural separation, and there is a passage for you to walk around. You are actually the one who has done the separation in some set. Okay, so such separation of data or features into two classes is human. It is there for the last 10,000, 20,000 years. So we do this every day. Why is it that we wear the shirt at the top and the pant at the bottom and not the other way around? All these, every day, every moment of our life, we are doing this separation and classification. This is correct, this is not correct. This is desirable, not desirable. This is to be chosen, this is to be rejected, etc., etc. So human beings are built on this idea of classification and selection. So nothing very strange about what we are doing to the data now. Okay. So this is a simple classifier, simple straight line. Suppose I have a data which can be separated by two straight lines, both do the job. The question to ask is, which is the better line? So you have line 1, line 2, line 1, line 2. Both will do the job. Which is better among the lines? So in function approximation and other things about machine learning, you will have close to 100 solutions. I want to know which is the best among them. This is not a problem of data processing where one solution you get, everybody accepts. Here it is different. Many of you will get 100 answers for the problem that you are trying to solve. You want to know which is the best, in what context, with what consideration. So, the best line which separates the two data sets is a line which makes sure that the distance between the nearest of this set and the nearest of this width is maximum, what is called margin. It is like finding the widest road. Whenever you have wide road, very easy to navigate. So, this idea of finding separators which maximizes the distance between two classes is called support vector machine. So, don't worry about machine learning. Lot of terminology, lot of things are told, all of which is finally very simple. Okay, it is lot to do with common sense and understanding the geometry and context. Okay, suppose data is not capable of being separated by a straight line. What do? You can fit a curve. If the data is very bad, you'll have to fit multiple curved lines or higher order curved lines. Even better is this. Don't do that. You want to separate all the plus from dash, you could have put a ellipsoid like this. Even better, put combination of three straight lines. The intersection of the three straight lines is this triangle. All the data within this triangle is one class. All the data outside this triangle is another class. Don't put curves, very rarely. Try to make it simple. Straight lines are simple. This is really what is neural network and boosting technique. All these, what it says is, try to make your classifier simple, and when the data is complex, try to get a combination of simple classifiers to handle the complex data. Don't try complex classifiers. Complex problem needs simple solution. If simple solution doesn't work, try combination of simple solutions. Don't complicate the solution. Very difficult to implement. There are other things called the kernel trick, which we will not do, but very interesting what's happening in machine learning. One thing in machine learning is we many times reverse the learning. Whatever was told to us for 40 years, we will go opposite of that. Things improve a lot. Almost like saying, whatever you have been taught in college and school, discard that for a moment, go opposite of that and see what happens. For example, everybody is focusing on data compression, dimensionality reduction, all this. So I have a problem in XY coordinate. This is the XY coordinate, X1, X2, whatever. So you can see the red circles and the blue circles lying on the floor. I want to find a separation between red and blue circles. Even a complicated combination of straight lines will not work. It is such bad data. So one interesting way is to look at this and map that to higher dimension. From 2 dimension, you go to 3 dimension. And in 3 dimension, you can see all the blue has come up. And if you pass a cardboard sheet along Z1, Z2 axis, the blue and red will separate. So kernel implicitly maps from 2D to 3D, making problem linearly separate. So just pass one cardboard sheet along Z1, Z2, it will separate. You could never have separated in this. So many times we go to higher dimension than what the problem is, and from there separate. It is like saying, I want to know where are the roads around my house. The only way to know where are the roads around my house is not stay on the road, but go to top of a hill. There you say, oh, you see that road which was there actually comes near our house. So take a bird's eye view. Clearly you can see where you are, what is happening, all that. This is the main idea. So I'm not going to go into other ideas, but what I'm saying in machine learning is you come across many ideas which were forbidden to you, told it was wrong. So working from already what you were told is from 3D go to 2D and work in a subspace and other things. But many times we do the reverse. Okay, be prepared. Okay? These are the idea of superproject machine. This thing. So the principle is this. There is a thing called Occam's razor. It was mentioned in 1320 AD. Of course, the original thing was in Latin. It says entities should not be multiplied unnecessarily. So what does this mean? It means the following. Simplicity is the order of things. Look for simple explanation, simple model, simple structure. And if the facts are complex, try combination of simple structure. Boosting, like I said. Simple classifiers called weak learners can have their performance boosted by taking weighted combination. Boosting also maximizes the margin. So this is where the boosting technique and the support vector machines all that come together. Okay. So it is like Mahatma Gandhi, arguing with the British for independence. He didn't go there with 10,000 soldiers, guns, and aircrafts, all that. He went there with half dhoti and nothing on the top. Okay, that was more scary for the Britishers because he was approaching the freedom movement in a very simple way. We are humans. We need our liberty, freedom, and other things. You are also humans. You want freedom and liberty, but you don't want to give it to others. This is not humanity. Simple. That's the big ground fact about Gandhi's method for freedom. The boosting technique. Simple. Thousands of simple people got together, did not use gun. They just collected salt from the sea beach, and that created the biggest social revolution in history. So you will see this very well. Democracy is like that. Simple, common people can remove big Palagars out of power. Okay, they will not use a gun. They will not bomb them. So boosting technique is very common now because it is very easy to design simple classifiers, implement simple classifiers. But a simple classifier is a weak learner. I want a strong learner. Therefore, I collect lot of simple classifiers and use it in a boosting. Okay. Lot of applications of supervised learning are extremely successful. Even today, 70% of the machine learning applications are built on supervised learning. Face detection, autonomous car, a driverless car, credit card, medical diagnosis, so many things. There are hundreds of applications which are successfully used. Your bank loan, then your loan approval, all this, okay? This is it. So what does supervised learning do? Mapping F from input to output using a telemetry. What is this function which maps that can be drawn from different hypothesis space like decision trees, separators, etc. There are plenty of algorithms offering a variety of trade-offs so that depending on the condition, your particular algorithm is better, that is more optimized. So a lot of interesting books. I think these two books are one of the two most important books for the basics. This has been reprinted many times now. When it came in 2001, it was not a popular book, but today, most useful book because all the ideas of hypothesis and statistical learning, which is exactly what we do, and of course the standard recognizing data as patterns, Duda and Hart, a new version of Duda, Hart and Stark by 2001. We used to read Duda and Hart in 1980-82. Okay. Problem is not that. The problem is this. Why should every data have a label? What if the data comes in a form which has no labels? There is no output label saying, I am so and so, this is this, it is truth, etc. etc. Such data is quite common. What do you do? And that's called unsupervised learning. There, many things like clustering. What is clustering? Clustering simply means I have data like this. I don't know what common things are there about this data. I want to make small groups of data. Hopefully, the group of data will contain many features which are common, and I can label that group of data with those features. Okay. Otherwise, maybe there is one group combining all of this. Maybe this is one group and another group. Maybe more accurate is this is one group, this is another group, this is a third group, this is a fourth group. I don't know how many groups. Many of you may have experienced this when you go travel. When you travel inside India, you don't bother about tourists. Wherever you go, you are not bothered. But let's say all of you go to an interesting place. And that's an interesting place. Let's say you go to Ellora, you go to Kailasnath temple. Or you come to Mysore and you come to KRS garden, whatever. While you are walking, a lot of tourists, you don't observe any of them. But while you are walking, if somebody is standing, group of 2 or 3 people and talking in Kannada, you will suddenly pay attention. Oh, they are also our people. There are also others who are talking in Hindi, Punjabi, all that. You don't bother. So you are looking at a language as a feature, and many times you strike a conversation. Oh, where are you from? Oh, I am from Davangere. Oh, I am from Mangalore. That kind of thing. But when you go abroad, if you see anybody with a Sardarji turban, you will talk to him. You will, even if you don't know proper Hindi, you will try to talk to him in Hindi because you are abroad and the only common feature with you is an Indian. This also happens in a large university hostels where students come from various states. As a fresher, you go and link to somebody who either talks your language or appears to be north, south, all this. So I'm not saying the divisions are good. I'm only saying the divisions are natural because the features are different. So whenever you have large data unclassified, unlabeled, first thing you want to do is group it. You group it on what you believe is some sense of data. For example, this data and this data are close to each other, some nearest. That's why this idea of nearest neighbor classification. What it does is it says I have data, so I put some number of clusters k. Say I want this data put in 4 clusters. Whether 4 is right or wrong, we don't know. We start. I can put 2 extremes. I can put all of this in one cluster. I can also put this in 100 cluster. Both are wrong. So I start with some number, guess the initial mean of this, that is minimum radius distance between that, and group all of them. Okay. Then I say whether the answer is accurate or acceptable. If not, I change this k, I change mu1, mu2, or do all that. And in due course, let me tell you, it converges. It converges reasonably well. Then I collect the features for data in that and assign labels based on those features. So indirectly what I have done is I have tried supervised learning by first learning the labels implicitly. I may not be correct, but I have tried many situations, it actually works. Okay. Many versions are there. Unsupervised learning. You can do expectation maximum algorithm for mixture of Gaussian, soft version of the K-mean, use base criteria to select K, Monte Carlo simulation, so many things. It has discovered new type of stars from spectral data, discovered new class of proteins and introns from DNA and protein sequences because we don't have labels for that. So unsupervised learning has also worked very well. Whenever you don't have clear data, try unsupervised learning. When you have data which is clear and labeled, supervised learning. In between all kinds of hybrid learning, you try unsupervised first and then supervised, all these kind of things are there. Okay. You can do, for example, you see hierarchical clustering of this thing. So from one pattern, slowly sub patterns emerge. We'll come to subspace methods later. Okay. You may have seen applications, what is called data mining, where it says the following. Student, doctor, retired faculty, whatever, these are the occupation, income levels, educational status, gender status, marital status, age. Given all this, can I find whether there is some rule? For example, such things are used by people in bank to process your loan application. You might have come across advertisement saying your loan processed in 2 minutes. What it means is they would have selected features from past experience, ask you to fill up your features in this, feed it to a computer which already has these rules. In 2 minutes, it will tell you whether you should be given loan or not. So this is how automatic data processing and other things are done. Okay. Unsupervised, plenty of things. Okay. See how it is done. Today, lot of including COVID results are like this. First thing, there is a huge complex map between various components of a very high dimensional problem. Okay. You repeat the experiments, you add new biological literature from other sources, build a model, builds the hypothesis for the solution, design experiments to verify that, expose it to real world. If the answer is very good, you can take it up. If the answer is very bad, replicate, do again once more, add new literature, change the model, etc. etc. For example, recently you would have come across that the Oxford University vaccine, which was based on very similar things, stopped for some time because when it was exposed to the real world, two patients died while taking the vaccine. So they are now analyzing why those two died and close to 400 succeeded. But why those two died? What were the side effects? What were the and again continue. That's why the vaccine release has not happened immediately. But this is exactly done like this. Okay. So today, at very high levels of pharmaceutical, genetic, and life science analysis, the cutting edge tool is machine learning. Okay. So the classic problem of unsupervised learning is what is called the nearest neighbor technique. What it says is the following: remember all the data given to you, and someone asks a question, find the nearest old data point, return the answer associated with this. For example, in this, yeah, suppose I have a cluster here, I have a cluster here, somebody gives you a data here. Somebody asks you, what is this data? What do? You from this data, you find out the nearest group. This distance is 1.5 centimeters. This is 1.43 centimeters. Therefore, this appears closer to this. You would have already clustered this and found features for this. When they ask something about this data, you give the answers from this data. That's how the nearest neighbor really works. But if the answer is bad, you make more clusters by having the intercluster and intracluster distances change. Okay. What is the advantage of nearest neighbor technique is it handles mixed variables, it handles missing data. Suppose I give a data here, I will immediately say this data is red because the nearest black is so far away, it is surrounded by that. Okay. Efficient for large data set, handles irrelevant attribute, easy to understand, and predictive power, all that. Okay. You see here how the genome sequence is. So genome sequences of all these are taken, and the phylogeny of the entire mammalian system is built. Goes back. So this is how the DNA sequence, it uses structural expectation maximum algorithm with spanning tree, all these data structures. So what is machine learning now being propelled by large number of fast computers? Today, I mean, all your Intel processors and other things have no meaning because almost everybody is using a GPU. A lot of data. The web is filled with data. There are online machine translation that you get in Google, multiple genome sequence, gene expression, new tricks. So all these things are powering machine learning. Not that all this was not there. All these things were there in isolation, but suddenly all these have come together. So these are the references. Kevin Murphy's book is also very good. A lot of material on the web. Web is filled with machine learning stuff. Kevin Murphy's book is very good. So is his lab in MIT, and some of the slides I use are from his class slides. Of course, this Bloom's slides a little, but Bishop's pattern recognition machine learning book is some kind of Bible now. But there are much more better books now than what it was written 10 years back. Okay. So we will look at subspace methods and things for face verification. But before that, Arul will do the subspace ideas. What I will do is I will quickly go to what we mean by pattern recognition so that we can look at the subspaces. The idea of subspaces will be vectors, vector space. Instead of vectors in the general vector space, we will use feature vectors. That is, vectors in the vector space where the data of the vectors come from features associated with the problem. The subspaces, then plenty of computational structures, standard, principal component, and other associated subspaces, then it will show that this is an attractive alternative neural and other approaches, but I still feel neural and statistical approaches should take 80% of the focus. Now, quickly look into pattern recognition because we are actually doing pattern recognition on a very large scale. So, there is no machine learning without pattern recognition, but there is pattern recognition without machine learning. So, that way, pattern recognition is one of the foundation building block for machine learning. So, let's see what this pattern recognition really is, and we will build a simple applications. So, what is pattern recognition? Informally recognize patterns in data. For example, I give a data like this and I ask, what is this image? What is this image? Is this image a face? Is this image a teacup? Or is this image a phone? Please remember, we are seeing it like this, but the computer machines will not see it like that. It will only see numbers. It will not see the face and other things. In fact, if I give data for this in a very peculiar way, the machine will recognize this as a phone because 100 years back, phone used to be like this. It had only one transmitter and receiver. So you talk, keep quiet, put the mic into your ear, you can hear the other fellow speak. Simultaneously talking and listening was not possible. The duplex system was not there. So, in many cases, a machine with very good algorithm will recognize this more like a phone or a teacup rather than a face. This is the problem of machine learning because the machines do not see it like what we see. You ask a child, what is this? It will say some amma. Even a child can recognize this face, whereas a very well trained machine may actually look at it as a phone. Because the machine doesn't see it like this, it just sees data of the pixels. Okay. So formally pattern recognition is assigning an object or an event to one of the several pre-specified categories. A category is usually called a class. So you have object and or an event for different classes. And you train the algorithm to recognize this and put it into one of the classes. That's all pattern recognition is. And we'll see how it does. For example, I have a lot of objects. These objects are picture objects. If I build a perfect pattern recognition system, it will recognize these objects and put it into two classes, males or females. A good task, but please remember, the same data can have different answer. If I train it in a different way, it will put it into two classes, one of which is a photo, other is not a photo. Of course, it has made a mistake here, but it can make errors, no doubt. So, the problem with pattern recognition and machine learning is, given the problem, you can have different correct solutions. You have to be very clear in what context your answer is correct. If the context is gender, this answer is correct. If the context is one of printable photo and a sketch, this is answer is correct. Okay. So machine learning becomes difficult because people don't have contextual information. Most of us don't know anything about the context of the problem. We just know how to solve. That's what we have been trained. There is no context sensitive information ever given in classroom teaching. Okay. You see how difficult these problems are. What is the difference between in humans? What is the difference between class and caste? For example, in Europe and in America and other places, hardly there is any distinction about caste because there are one or two castes and all of them. So class distinction is there. Upper class, lower class, middle class, all that. Whereas in India, caste dominates, class has also come in. So there is a lot of confusion between class and caste. Context tells you what it is. Okay. So we don't have contextual learning and thinking in our academic training. That's why many of us are able to solve problems, but we don't know how good the answer is. We get the answer, but we don't know whether the answer is really correct or not. But the accuracy is some 95, so we feel very happy. Okay. For example, same problem with character recognition. I have handwritten word, and it will recognize this as hello world. So, what are the classes for this? All the classes between A to Z. 26 separate classes I have to train so that the objects are put into one of those classes. Okay. Medical diagnosis. Suppose I give pathology or CT scan, whatever data, tumor, a trained medical system will classify it into cancerous cells, non-cancerous cells. See something. Non-cancerous cells are reasonably regular in shape, whereas cancerous cells are irregular in shape. This is how a machine learning system will take pathology and scan data and use it to classify number of cancerous cells, number of non-cancerous cells in a volume of material, and based on that find the ratio, and depending on the ratio it will tell what stage cancer it is, all the okay, yeah. Color, shape, size, everything is there, so many features. Suppose the same problem for speech understanding. I give a speech waveform, a perfect recognition system will say recognition. So this is basically speech to text conversion. The reverse can also be done. I can do text to speech conversion. Even more interesting, I can do speech to speech conversion. Today you will see some of the early versions of Google phone and other things. You can talk in Kannada. The person with whom you are talking will hear it in English, because they are building a phone which converts Kannada to English, Russian to English, English to German. Therefore, they are now planning to build a phone which has a universal converter. You talk in any language you want, a person there will listen to what he wants. He talks in his language, you will listen to in your language. Therefore, when you do this very well, it will kill all the language in the world, because nobody needs to learn any more languages other than your one language. Okay, it's happening. It's already come there. Okay, but very high level machine learning. Okay, so we will learn how to do this thing based on one simple example. This is what is called the famous toy example. Okay, this is realistic. It is happening on boats already, and there is also a problem in Mangalore. Those who are in Mangalore will recognize one of the problems of fishermen in Mangalore. So the problem is the following: people go in a boat, put net into the sea, catch fish. Nowhere in the world, when you catch fish, you will get only one variety of fish. Normally, 2, 3, 4 varieties of fish are caught together. Then you want to sort it into two classes, because this is cheap and voluminous. This is very expensive. For example, one breed of fish is priced 10 times higher than this. I don't want to sell this at this price. If I sell this at this price, nobody will buy. So I need to separate it. Now, what happens in Bangalore or Malpe, wherever it is, people catch it, bring it to the shore, manually sort it. You will see people, fisherwomen in baskets, sorting it out and taking one variety and selling it. Other variety somebody else sells, or it is thrown back. Okay. What happens in foreign fishing boats are, when they catch in the sea, they have this system where there is a camera which records each fish, automatically sorts it. In fact, Japanese fishing ships not only have this, it is salted, cut, all this waste portion dumped into the sea there for other fishes to eat. It is put into a can, it is refrigerated there and brought to the cold. Whereas in Mangalore and other places, you bring it to Bangalore port, you manually salt it, then try selling it by evening. 30 to 40% waste already happens because it will be fresh fish from the sea means approximately 8 hours after it has been caught. Whereas here, fresh fish is immediately canned, less than 1 hour from where it has been caught. Okay, so that's why there is a lot of contextual problem between foreign fishing boats and Indian fishing boats on the coast of Bangalore. Okay, so how is it done? It takes so there's a conveyor belt where all the fishes are put one by one. It comes to a sorting chamber where there's an image. Fish image is sent to a classifier. The classifier will tell you this fish is salmon. So the gate will open here, it falls into this basket. Otherwise, it will close here and fall here. Automatic sorting, close to 1 million fishes a day. How is it done? It is done like this. So how to design a pattern recognition system, which is the elementary machine learning system. First thing, collect data, very important. Collect data and classify by hand, very important for all of you. You must learn how to solve a simple problem, pen and paper by yourself. Don't run to MATLAB, all that and do. Solve a simple low dimension problem, learn. After that, a high dimension problem, the computer can do. So don't ever, in fact, I as a teacher will never ask any student to come without a pen and paper and solve in front of me a small size problem. Only when he or she understands a small size problem correctly what is happening, it is worth giving a big size problem. So you have data. What kind of data? Salmon, sea bass. Suppose you were given all these images and you were asked to separate salmon from sea bass. What do you do? First observe. Observe. Look at each of them and see what different color is different, length is different, then number of fins are different. So extract possibly discriminating features. What are the features? Length. Maybe if I use length, shorter the length, sea salmon is better. Longer the length, sea bass is better. Therefore, if I use length as a feature, I can separate this from this. Then lightness, width of the fish, salmon is slightly wider than this. Number of fins, sea bass has more, etc. I choose a classifier. So how do I choose a classifier? I choose a model for the classifier. I train the classifier and part of the collected data, which is called training data. Then I test the classifier and the rest of the data, which is test data. And if I have done the classifier well, that is, if I have done the training well, it means I have selected the features well. The test data also should give me very good answer. Then I say, okay, I will use this now here. I will put that here, allow the camera to capture the image, automatically measure the length, and it will tell me lesser than this length, call it salmon, longer than this length, call sea bass. Exactly what is done. See here, this is the data. You must have good data to begin with. Pen and paper analysis. You must get the answers correct. You must learn the algorithm well. Then scale it up. Notice, salmon tends to be shorter. So, use fish length as a feature. Discriminating feature means it's a feature which discriminates one from another. Count the number of bass and salmon of each length. Total there are 50 fishes. Out of fishy, 50 fishes total. Bass of length 2 centimeters, none. Bass of 4 centimeters, only one. Bass of 8 centimeters, 3, so on. Similarly, salmon. Salmon of 2 centimeters, 2, 4 centimeters, 5. There are salmon of 14 centimeters, none. I write a graph, very important to visualize. That's why machine learning along with graphics and visualization is very important because you are trying to visualize 20,000 data points. You cannot write 20,000 data points on the pen and paper. Okay. So this curve is salmon, this curve is sea bass. What do I want? I want to find a line which makes classification very easy. What do? I do this. Because I'm using fish length as a feature which discriminates, I find the best length, select that as threshold and say, anytime the length of the fish is less than the threshold, call it salmon. Whenever the fish length is greater than threshold, call it sea bass. For example, I choose L equal to 5. I choose L equal to length 5 here. And say less than this salmon, greater than that sea bass. If I do that, I get this. On the training data on hand, I get this. Okay. Number of sea basses which are misclassified. Number of salmon and sea bass correctly classified. So the total error 10 plus 5, 15 on 16 plus on 17. 17 out of 50 fishes are wrongly classified. 34% error. Okay. 1/3 is a error. What do you do? Whenever you have a problem where 33%, 34% is error, it means two things. One, your approach is wrong. Second, the approach is working because it is giving you 66% accuracy. You can find a way to improve. So this is another thing in machine learning. Whenever something works, don't discard. It is working. That is why it is giving you some error. Find a way to minimize the error. Find a way to improve the performance. Let us see. Because I can now use a computer, I can try all length. I tried 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I choose all length and find the error. And as people know in image processing and other things, valley points in the histogram are good places to separate. So at a fish length L equal to 9, the answer is very good. 20% only is error. Earlier error was 34%. You did not change anything. You just change the threshold, it improves. But at L equal to 10, error will be 22. So, of all the lengths, L equal to 9 gives you 20% error, 80% accurate. Okay, what did we learn? We learned one thing. Length is a poor feature alone, meaning only on length I will get 80% accuracy. What accuracy I want? I want about 99% accuracy. I have got 80 with 1. Can I try another feature? Yes, salmon tends to be lighter. Try average fish lightness because the conveyor belt can also weigh. If I do that, and based on the feature which is lightness on a scale of 1 to 5, length was 1 to 15, lightness is 1 to 5 scale. If I do that, I actually get 8% error with a lightness threshold of 3.5. If I repeat that with a different feature, I get only 8% error, already 92% accuracy with only one feature like lightness. With length alone, 80% accurate. What do? I want 99%. So I do this. Combine. This is how problem shifts from one dimension to two dimension. Length, lightness. If I do that, the 50 data points look like this. I can find a classifier which is also called a decision boundary which separates this and this with a error of only 4%. See, with only two features, I am able to get 96% accuracy. I want 3 more percent. I may have to use 2 or 3 more features. That's all. So, with 5 or 6 features, I can get 99%. Typically, most data are in 100 dimension space. I don't need that much. If I can find the interesting, when I say interesting, a subspace with 4 or 5 dimensions where most of the data's features lie, I have solved the problem very well. That's why subspaces work. Spaces don't work because the problem exists in the space. For example, even in your colleges, in all your colleges, there are so many departments, so many rooms, so many classrooms, etc. etc. What are the interesting small regions in your college? What is really interesting? For me, in any campus I come, the most interesting small part of the campus is the canteen. That is where people from other departments come, students come, teachers come, outsiders come, visitors come. There are a lot of nice talk there. Everything unconnected with your subject. But you will get to know what is happening in the college or in the university. Canteen is the place. I wish the vice chancellor sit in the canteen every day for 1 hour. They will be able to administer better because in canteen, all the wrong things about the college is discussed. Okay. Canteen is also a place where interesting faculty from other departments are available for talking. You have a problem in computer science, but you want some mathematics help. You cannot go to the maths department, but there is a possibility in the maths teacher who once taught you a class some time back is sitting across the table drinking coffee in the canteen. You say, sir, I have this issue. He may actually solve the problem for you immediately. Therefore, subs- subspaces are important. Subspaces are important. Finding a subspace is difficult because there are infinite subspaces for every space. Finding an interesting subspace means finding a subspace with low dimension, which also contains all the features of the data. Then all the nice things happen. But we will teach you those things in the next session. Okay? So the problem now is very clear. I have this and I can easily get 2 or 3 more features, solve the problem. Okay. Typically, people try to get 100% accuracy, and I want to tell you why 100% accuracy is wrong. You see, the classification boundary was like this. I want 100% accuracy. What I do is this. I make a classification boundary like this. This is for 50 fishes training data. I got an ideal decision boundary with only 0% error, 100% accurate. But my problem is this. If I get new data, which is more fishes are here. What worked very well on the training set works very badly on the testing set. 75% correct, 25% error. Therefore, you must always build systems which have small positive error. Don't try for perfection. Okay. This is it. It was a very complicated boundary on the training set. Very poor generalization. It is overfitting of data. So work well so that you have good like this. See, this was the training data. On the new testing data, the old training data with 2% error also looks very well. It continues. Maybe it will have only 1% error now. But you tried 100% accuracy, solved it. Again, the same problem with William of Ockham. Do not complicate. Find simple classifier, simple decision boundary. Don't complicate it. Okay. So the entire flow is this. How the entire thing happens. You take the input data through sensors. The sensors can be camera, microphone, medical imaging, anything. Segment the data, extract discriminating features, do the classification, build context, and do the post processing. For example, when you post process, you got T and E CAD. You can easily call this DCAD because the context tell you there is no T and E CAD but DCAD. This part is missing, this information. You can add it. So sense, segment, feature extract, classify, post process, take a decision. If it is wrong, question the classifier, question what features you have selected, find out whether the segmentation done was correct, even worse, find out whether you have collected the data correctly. Therefore, resampling the data is also allowed in machine learning. If you don't get good answers, you can question all this and we will see. Okay, this is a good point to stop because we can take a few questions now. Any questions?
So if the participants have any questions, you're welcome to post in the chat box. We will consolidate it.
Chat box, then we can continue for a few more minutes then. I thought they will ask audio questions only.
Yes, sir, we can continue. This session will end at 11:30.
Okay, so how you do this is the following. You have to collect data, tremendous amount of sensors. Like I said, there are 20 different sensors on your mobile phones today. That's why the mobile phone collects so much information even when you are not using. Even when you are not talking or when you are not using the video, the temperature, humidity, GPS location, your gyroscope data, everything is collected all the time. Okay. This is very important. How to choose the features and how to choose the model for the classifier. After that, it is routine, training and evaluating. These two need lot of prior knowledge. It is like going to an experienced doctor, going to an experienced lawyer, or going to an experienced teacher who knows how to teach, how to handle a case, how to represent, what features to present, all this. Okay? That's why you go to experienced people, because same is here. How do you get experience to choose this? Only way to get experience is to solve many problems. This idea of just learning a computer skill and getting a job has actually killed India. If you look at Infosys, there are 1,60,000 employees, and all the 1,60,000 employees cannot solve a simple problem in their life. They can code. Somebody else is giving them the features. Somebody has already given the model. They will just code. That is why if there is an important problem in India, it can never be solved because these people are busy coding. Somebody who has designed something elsewhere, they will not tell them what features they have selected. They will not tell them what classifier their model they have chosen. They will simply tell them, these are there, you code and give me. Okay. So how do you collect data? Very difficult. Most rigorous thing, collect data correctly. How do you know when we have collected enough data? We don't know. When you collect data, number doesn't matter. Quality matters. When I say quality, suppose you are collecting A to Z, text processing, you cannot collect 10,000 copies of A, 20,000 copies of B. All I want is 26 samples. One for A, one for B, one for C, all the way one for Z. So, what we want is rich data, diverse data, not quantity of data. Quality and diversity of data is more important than quantity of data. We are now used to all the time quantity. Our PhD thesis, good thesis 50 pages, okay thesis 100 pages, bad thesis 150 pages. The guide himself will say thesis is very bad, Therefore, 150 pages you will not pass. You make it 200. Write lot of garbage. So we have a bad habit in our education training where we always give quantity over quality. Very poor way to do machine learning, because machine learning is all about quality and diversity. Okay. Then how to choose features? You see here, data is like this, but if I choose the features carefully, automatically, like that length and lightness, the data will separate very well if I choose the features very well. If I choose features badly, data looks like this. What was difficult to separate becomes impossible. Prior knowledge plays a great role. That's why domain knowledge is very important. Very important to have domain knowledge. This is another thing. We have no domain knowledge in anything. We have only a skill to code. We have no domain knowledge. Therefore, even when we code, we don't know if we are going wrong. Syntactically, the code may be correct, but answers are very bad because we have no domain knowledge. Very important again. Whenever you take up a task, look at the domain of the problem and build a domain knowledge in that. Very important. Okay? Then choose model. What type of model? Simple classifier, neural net, whatever, plenty, decision tree, hypothesis, Bayes. So different models. Again here, you must know at least half a dozen different models, because many times one model may not work. Okay. This is what is the best classifier of the problem unsolved. You have to try many things. So we actually today have hybrid classifiers, hybrid models. Okay. Then we do fusion, all that. Then train. How do I train? How do I train the classifier? How do I know I have trained well? It is like all your coaching classes. Why is it that students who go to coaching classes do well in the exam? Because in the coaching classes, concepts are not taught. Only training for a particular type of problems is taught. General learning is very poor. They are trained to pass an exam. That's all. It's like IAS, KAS, JE, all that. In fact, Indian education system is very bad because all of them come from an output of a coaching system. Terrible. They have no general interest, no awareness, no domain knowledge, no lateral thinking. Okay. How do I train well? Okay. Then finally, how do I evaluate? How do I know what is the performance? Normally, the performance is built on least square error. Okay. But there are other criteria for evaluating also. But all these are needed. This is more important than machine learning. This is more important than CNN and deep nets, all that. Those are architectures. This is the way the problem is solved. Focus on this, then put it on the powerful machine, it will do. Okay. And this is what the machines also do. Okay. Okay. So a lot of exciting and important applications, but must solve many issues for successfulness. And we will go ahead. Okay. The time is up. We will go ahead with the subspaces shortly. You see here, what kind of methods to use models. Suppose I know a lot about the problem, that is even the conditional probability is known between datas, then I can do Bayes theorem. When I know very little about the data, I have no idea what the probability distribution of the data is, and all the data is unlabeled, I will have to do unsupervised learning and clustering. In between, from known quite a lot about the problem to unknown about the problem, there are many other things. I can do maximum likelihood and Bayesian parameter estimation, non-parametric estimation, discriminant functions and neural nets. Then last. So you must know what you know about the problem in the domain. How is the data related to each other? What is the statistical distribution of the data, etc., etc. Okay. People ask how many features to select. This is it. As we saw, error decreased as we move from one feature to another. But at some point, there is a minimum error. After that, if I choose more features, the error will increase. So you'll have to be very careful to realize how many features to use for a problem. We'll come to this PCA later. Okay. Yeah. I'll stop here.